Welcome back, YouTubers, to the Evil Bad Book Club. I'm Everyday BS, and today we'll be reading Chapter 24 of the Turner Diaries. Stand by. August 8, 1994. For the last 4 days, I've been acting head of our newly organized Department of Public Resources, Utilities, Services, and Transportation for Southern California, acronym of PRUST. It is a strictly temporary position, and within the next 10 days, I will turn the post over to another engineer, one of the group of volunteers I've been working with during the last 2 weeks. He will have the able assistance of a number of local people who were formerly employed either by one of the state, county, or municipal agencies here or by one of the private utility companies. And I have confidence he'll be able to iron the remaining bugs out of the department. With more than half the key people back at work here now, things are beginning to run almost normally. We have restored electricity, water, sewage treatment, rubbish collection, and telephone service to all occupied areas now. Although electricity is strictly rationed, we have even put about 50 gasoline stations back in operation, and those civilians whose work assignments give them priority status can obtain fuel for their automobiles. PRUST covers our whole enclave, all the way from Vandenberg to the Mexican border. And I've done a lot of traveling to survey the needs and resources of the various areas and to get everything roughly coordinated. I'm really very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish in such a short time. Next to the military and to the Department of Food, PRUST has the most essential function to perform and employs the most workers of all the agencies we've set up here. One of the most interesting aspects of my work has been setting up the interfacing with the Department of Food. They produce the food, we transport it, store it, and distribute it. There were several problems to be worked out, primarily because a certain amount of the food which is produced does not go directly from the fields to the distribution points, but is processed first. This means that Department of Food needs to concern itself to a certain extent with storage and transportation from field to processing plant before PRUST takes over the responsibility. Also, DF has a specialized transportation need in moving its workers from their living quarters to the fields and back. I have had to familiarize myself with DF's whole operation in order to decide the best way to define our respective responsibilities. I am very impressed by what I have seen. They have mobilized more than 600,000 workers, about a quarter of the entire productive segment of the population under our control, for the production of food. Between 10 and 15% of these workers are those whites who were originally in farming or ranching in this area. Nearly a third are young volunteers in the 12 to 18 age range. The rest are people from urban areas who formerly worked in non-essential occupations and have now been assigned to work crews under DF's supervision. Many in the last group are now doing the first really productive work in their lives. This means DF is performing an important function of social rehabilitation as well as food production, and our Department of Education is working closely with DF on this. Every worker receives 10 hours of lectures each week, and he is graded not only on his general attitude toward his work and on his productivity, but also on his responsiveness to these lectures. There is a continual sifting process going on with workers being reassigned to new work groups on the basis of attitude and performance in their previous groups. In this way, they are already beginning to emerge from the general mass, the first leader trainee work groups. From the latter will be selected candidates for organization membership. On several occasions during my tour of DF's operation, I stopped to talk with workers in the fields. The morale varied considerably from the groups with a high proportion of former social parasites to the leader trainee groups, but nowhere could it be called poor. Everyone has been made to understand that, despite the dislocations and the hardships caused by the revolution, we are now sure that there will be enough food to go around, but those who will not work will not eat either. My most profound impression comes from the fact that every face I saw in the fields was white. No Chicanos, no Orientals, no blacks, no mongrels. The air seems cleaner, the sun brighter, life more joyous. What a wonderful difference this single accomplishment of our revolution has made. And the workers all feel the difference too, whether they are ideologically with us or not. There is a new feeling of solidarity among them, of kinship, of unselfish cooperation to complete a common task. Most of the news reports from other parts of the country are very cheering to us. Although the system is still holding on, it is only doing so through increasingly open and brutal repression. The entire country is under martial law, and the government is relying heavily on hastily armed and deputized black goon squads to keep the white civilian population intimidated. Half the system's regular military units are still confined to their barracks as unreliable. Conditions are deteriorating nearly everywhere. Power outages, transportation and communications breakdowns, terror bombings, food shortages, assassinations, and massive industrial sabotage are plaguing the system and helping to maintain the general unrest. The organization's action units are doing a heroic job, but their losses are heavy. Their only aim now is to maintain the pressure on the system and the general population by striking at every available target again and again and again without let-up. From the new volunteers who are slipping into our area through the enemy lines at a growing rate, we get a consistent story about the effect the chaotic conditions are having on people. The white liberals and the minorities are screaming hysterically for the government to do something. The conservatives are moaning, wringing their hands, and deploring the irresponsibility of it all. And the average Joes are becoming more and more exasperated with everyone concerned. Us, the system, the blacks, and the various liberal and conservative spokesmen. They just want to return to normalcy and their accustomed comforts as soon as possible. The system propagandists are making a big thing out of our forced evacuation of non-whites and our summary liquidation of race criminals and other hostile and degenerate elements here. It's not having the desired effect, however, except among the liberals and the minorities. The bulk of the population is too preoccupied with its own problems at the moment to shed a tear for the victims of racism. The biggest fly in our ointment is Northern California. Things are completely out of control there. General Harding has really botched the situation. It serves us right for having anything to do with a conservative. He, like all the rest, was standing behind the door when the brains were passed out, and so he got a double dose of pig-headedness to make up for it. Note to reader. Turner is referring to Lieutenant General Arnold Harding, commander of Travis Air Force Base, which was located about halfway between San Francisco and Sacramento. Harding's role in the Great Revolution, though important, lasted only 11 weeks. He was finally assassinated by an organization team on September 16, 1994, after several earlier attempts failed. If the situation in San Francisco, Sacramento area doesn't improve soon, we're likely to be involved in a civil war against the troops under Harding. The system would really love that. The only thing Harding has done right so far was breaking with Washington during the first week of our July 4th offensive. As soon as it became clear that the system had lost its grip in California. On his own initiative, he declared an independent military government in Northern California and got nearly all the other officers and military units stationed there, except our own undercover military people, of course, to go along with him. Revolutionary Command made the strictly practical decision to let General Harding carry the ball in his area, and our people were instructed not to oppose him. This had the effect of substantially reducing our own losses, although the military has actually suffered many more casualties in Northern California than in the South. This is because Harding has failed to take sufficiently radical measures to consolidate his authority and to deal with black military personnel. And he has failed utterly to get the civilian population under control again, because he seems unable to understand the necessity for radical measures. The Jews and the other Bolshevik elements in San Francisco are running circles around him, and the Chicanos in the Sacramento area have been rioting more or less continuously for a month. When a delegation of organization people went to Harding last month and suggested a joint organization military rule for Northern California, with Harding's forces handling defense matters and the organization handling civilian matters, including police functions, Harding arrested them and has refused to release them. Since then, he has been issuing idiotic proclamations about restoring the Constitution, stamping out communism and pornography, and holding new elections to reestablish the Republican form of government intended by the Founding Fathers, whatever that means. And he has denounced our radical measures in the South as communism. He is appalled that we didn't hold some sort of public referendum before expelling the non-whites, and that we didn't give individual trials to the Jews and race criminals we dealt with summarily. Doesn't the old fool understand that the American people voted themselves into the mess they're in now? Doesn't he understand that the Jews have taken over the country fair and square, according to the Constitution? Doesn't he understand that the common people have already had their fling at self-government and they blew it? Where does he think new elections can possibly lead now? With this generation of TV-conditioned voters, except right back into the same Jewish pigsty. And how does he think we could have solved our problems down here, except by the radical measures we used? Doesn't Harding understand that the chaos in his area will continue to grow worse until he identifies the categories of people responsible for that chaos and deals with them categorically? That it is physically impossible, considering the relative numbers involved, for him to deal with the Jews, the blacks, the Chicanos, and the other troublesome elements on an individual basis? Apparently not, because the idiot is still making appeals to responsible black leaders and to patriotic Jews to help him restore order. Harding, like conservatives in general, can't bring himself to do what must be done, because it would mean punishing the innocent along with the guilty, the good, Negroes and the loyal Jews with the rest, as if those terms had any meaning in the present context. And so, afraid of treating individuals unjustly, he is floundering around helplessly while everything goes to hell and the civilians in his area die like flies from starvation. Generals should be made of sterner stuff. The one advantage to us from the situation in the north is the flood of white refugees it has brought us. More people have been coming into our area in the last 2 weeks to get away from the anarchy around San Francisco than have been slipping through the system's lines from the rest of the country. And while they last, it is interesting to have living, breathing examples of 3 types of social orders simultaneously before us. In the north, a conservative regime. To the east, liberal Jewish democracy. And here, the beginning of a whole new world rising out of the ruins of the old. August 23. Tomorrow, I leave for Washington again. I have been at Vandenberg for 4 days learning how nuclear warheads work. I am in charge of a group which will hand carry 4 60-kiloton warheads to Washington for concealment in key locations around the Capitol. Approximately 50 other men, all members of the order, were trained with me, and each of them has a similar mission as a group leader. That means a total of about 200 warheads to be dispersed around the country, initially with more to follow later. All the warheads are identical. They were removed from a stockpile of 240 millimeter artillery projectiles our people found here. They've been slightly modified so they can be detonated by coded radio signals. They will be our insurance in case we lose our missile launch facility here. The present mission is the hairiest one I've ever been assigned. It will be a lot tougher than blowing up the FBI headquarters 2 years ago. 5 of us must make our way through 3,500 miles of enemy territory, carrying 4 nuclear bombs weighing a total of just over 520 pounds, without getting caught. Then we have to sneak them into areas that will be heavily guarded and conceal them, so that there is a negligible chance of their being found. Aside from the dangers involved, which tie my guts in a knot whenever I think about them, I have mixed feelings about this mission. On the one hand, I hate to leave California. Being a participant in the birth of our new society here has been tremendously exciting and rewarding for me, and our work is just beginning. New projects are being launched every day, and I want to be a part of them. We are laying the foundation here for the new social order which will serve our race for the next 1,000 years. And to be able to live and work in a sane, healthy white man's world, that is something which is beyond valuation for me. These last few weeks have been wonderful. It is terribly depressing to think of leaving this white oasis and plunging once again into that cesspool of mongrels and blacks and Jews and sick, twisted white liberals out there. On the other hand, it has been more than 3 months since I've seen Catherine, and it seems like a year. The one thing which has limited my enthusiasm about what we've accomplished here is that she hasn't been able to share it with me. And now, with the changed situation, she and others in Washington are living under much more difficult conditions and in greater danger than we here in California. Realizing that makes me feel guilty every day I remain. The strongest feeling I have now, however, is one of responsibility. I am both proud and awed that I still only a probationary member of the order and being entrusted with such an important and difficult task. I must try hard to put all other thoughts and feelings aside until it is successfully completed. During the last 4 days, I have not only learned about the structure and functioning of the warheads for which I will be responsible, but also why this mission is vital. That involved a lesson in strategy which has been very sobering. The people in Revolutionary Command, with their eyes fixed firmly on our long-range goal of total victory over the system, have not let themselves be deluded by our gains in California and present difficulties the system is facing everywhere. The grim facts are these. First, outside of California, the system remains essentially intact, and the disparity in numbers between the system's forces and our own is even worse than it was before July 4th. That's because we've been recklessly expending our strength everywhere else in the country to keep the system off balance long enough for us to consolidate our gains here. Second, despite the military forces under our control here, the system, as soon as it has tidied up some of its present military morale problems, will be able to pound us into the ground by conventional means with very little trouble. The only thing that really kept them off of us this long has been our threat of nuclear reprisal against New York and Tel Aviv. Third, our nuclear threat is in grave danger of being neutralized. The system has the capability for launching a surprise first strike against us with a high probability of knocking all our hardened launch silos before we can fire our missiles. Revolutionary Command's intelligence sources indicate that such a surprise strike is exactly what is being planned. The system is holding off only until it has finished an emergency military reorganization, which will give it confidence in the political reliability of the U.S. Army. It wants to follow up its destruction of our nuclear capability immediately with a massive invasion which will finish us off in a day or two. Worse, the system has an alternative plan which calls for nuclear annihilation of all of Southern California. It will carry out that plan if it fails to regain complete confidence in the reliability of its military ground forces within the next couple of weeks. We still don't know the system's exact timetable, but we have reports that more than 25,000 of the wealthiest and most influential Jews and their families have quietly packed up and left the New York area within the last 10 days, most of them taking only a moderate amount of luggage with them, perhaps enough for a 2 or 3 week vacation. Thus, our entire strategy against the system has been undermined. If we could hold the enemy off indefinitely, or even for a year or two, with our threat of nuclear retaliation, then we could pull him down. With California as a training and supply base, and with a population of more than 5 million whites to recruit from, we could steadily escalate our guerrilla war throughout the rest of the country. But without California, we can't do it, and the system knows that. So what we must do immediately is to disperse a large number of nuclear weapons outside California. We will then detonate at least one of those weapons to convince the system that a new situation exists. If the system attacks California after that, we will be obligated to detonate all or most of our dispersed weapons in an effort to destroy the system's capability for organized resistance. Unfortunately, much of the white population of the country is bound to be lost. If we are forced to that extremity, the country will also be open to the danger of invasion by other nations. A grim prospect indeed. And that's it for Chapter 24, YouTubers. Come back tonight for the breakdown and come back tomorrow and we'll go over Chapter 25. I'll check you YouTubers out later.